Hello again, and let's just begin with the latest developments out of Ukraine and the Russian invasion. The Ukrainian Armed Forces says nearly 9,000 military personnel have been killed in the war with Russia. As a first toll provided by General Valery Zaluzhny in Ukraine's military top brass since the Russian invasion on February 24. He was speaking to a conference in honor of military veterans and the families of those killed, telling them that children need protection in several parts of the country, including the capital, Kyiv. Meanwhile, Russia's Federal Security Service is accusing Ukrainian counterparts of being behind the weekend murder of daughter of ultra-nationalist Russian ideologue Alexander Dugin. Dugin is also a close ally to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Daria Dugin was killed after a suspected explosive device detonated on the Toyota Land Cruiser she was traveling in, according to investigators. Father and daughter had been attending a festival outside Moscow, and Dugin had decided to switch cars at the last minute. Daria has been described as a journalist and political expert, and a murder case has been opened. Plus, forensic examinations will be carried out to determine what happened. Ukraine has denied involvement in the incident, but the FSB says the attack was carried out by a Ukrainian woman born in 1979, whom it named. It said the individual had fled Russia for Estonia after the killing, and that she and her teenage daughter had first arrived in Russia in July and spent a month preparing for the attack by shadowing Daria. President Vladimir Putin has sent his sincere condolences to the family, calling her death a vile, cruel crime and describing her as a bright, talented person with a real Russian heart, kind, loving, sympathetic and open. Daria's father gave a statement a while ago calling her death a terrorist act by the Ukrainian Nazi regime, and that his daughter was brutally murdered in front of him. Well, staying in Russia, the country's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, Gennady Gatilov, has ruled out the possibility of a diplomatic solution to end the war in Ukraine in the immediate future. He told the media Moscow and Kyiv had been very close to an agreement on pausing the conflict during negotiations hosted by Turkey in April, but he accuses the US and other Western supporters of Ukraine of pressing the country to walk away from discussions over a possible ceasefire. Over in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky is warning that Russia could take the provocative step of putting Ukrainian soldiers on trial as Kyiv marks 31 years of independence on Wednesday. Citing media reports that Russia is preparing to put Ukrainian fighters captured during the siege of Mariupol on a public trial to coincide with the independence anniversary on Wednesday. Mass events are banned in Kyiv from today until Thursday because of the high risk of Russian missile strikes, one of the northeastern city of Kharkiv. An extended curfew is due to come into effect from Tuesday evening until Thursday morning. The war in Ukraine has been going on for 6 months now. The Russian military forces are not letting up on those strikes. On Sunday, Russia claimed it had destroyed an ammunition depot in southern Ukraine's Odessa region, while Ukraine claimed its forces repelled Russia's Donetsk offensives from multiple directions. Russian Defense Military spokesperson Igor Konashenkov says the Russian forces with high-precision sea-based long-range caliber missiles near the village of Mayoskoy in Odessa region. The Russian armed forces destroyed an ammunition depot with missiles for the American HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems and Western-made anti-aircraft systems. Konashenkov said Russian air forces also destroyed a fuel depot of Ukraine's 102nd Territorial Defense Brigade in Zaporizhzhia region, and that the Russian military also destroyed 2 American M777 howitzers in combat positions near a region in Kherson. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported on Sunday the army had repelled Russian offensives in Slavyansk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and other locations in the Donetsk region. And with winter just around the corner, Ukrainians are worried about energy supplies amid threats of Russian gas, electricity supply cuts. Some have even begun stockpiling. Some are growing their own vegetables. But of course, security is the huge concern here for heating when winter comes by. Concerns are being driven by rumors that Russia will disconnect Ukraine from the Russia-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which supplies half of Ukraine's electricity. with Ukraine's average winter temperatures ranging between -5 to 5 degrees Celsius. Electricity or gas supply cuts could mean unbearable living conditions for major population centers. The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins me now. She's in Kyiv. Anna, great to see you again. Is that a major concern that you have also found across the country, how people would survive the winter months if those rumors are true about Russia planning to cut the supply from the Zaporizhzhia power plant?
Good evening. Well, Ukrainians are getting ready for a very difficult winter, and government has already announced that the conditions, so basically government will do everything possible, taking into consideration the conditions and everything that might happen in the future on the field, on the war field. But Ukrainians are getting ready, preparing for a very difficult winter. And of course, if we consider that Russian forces will actually try to disconnect the Zaporizhzhia power plant from the Ukrainian electricity system, this will definitely create additional difficulties. For the moment, we hear that at least the government is saying that the situation is not catastrophic in these terms, but everything could change any minute. It would only depend on the possible, attacks by Russian forces on the territory of Ukraine. But again, it might not. So it definitely that Ukrainians are getting ready for, to have less heating at home. This is for sure. And if we talk about private buildings, they also have some additional sources of energy in place. But again, for the moment, it is not, considered as catastrophic. It will be difficult. It will be much, less heating than it is usually in Ukraine, because Ukrainian people are actually get used to quite warm conditions in their homes. So people are just getting ready physically and morally for this winter, but for the moment, no catastrophic, predictions are in place.
Yeah, and all eyes are on that nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia. The UN Secretary General calling for demilitarization of the area. But there are also even bigger concerns, aren't there, Anna? Independence Day is coming up on Wednesday. There are fears that it could turn into a bloodbath. What are people expected to do on that day? Because events have been cancelled. But, it would bring some hope to Ukrainians to at least celebrate their independence amidst this war.
Well, Ukrainians are not planning to celebrate, really. Of course, it is a very important day. I think that if we take, general picture, people will try to just be together with their families. No mass events are planned. Nothing. Government is asking people to be very, very careful, especially when the air raid siren is on, because this particular days, tomorrow and Wednesday, tomorrow is the National Flag Day, and on Wednesday is the Independence Day. So these 2 days in particular are under very high risk. And also Ukrainian intelligence is confirming, and also international intelligence, that Russian forces are bringing more and more artillery systems and missiles to the territory of Belarus on one of the airfields in Zabrivka, which is very close to the border with Ukraine. And it is expected that a mass missile attack could happen from there. So definitely Ukrainians are very much on the alert. President is announced in his latest speech that actually government is getting ready for this week, and it is a very high risk of massive missile attacks. But again, people are just, they're just ready to live through these days, and it will be, more security and more attention to the science of the air alarm.
Indeed. But let's talk about the murder of Daria Dugin, the daughter of one of the Russian president's closest allies, Alexander. Russia's accusing Ukraine of planting the bomb in the car she was driving in, and reports say that her father was the most likely target. Ukraine has denied it and denied it had any hand in the murder. Could this be another case of self-sabotage from Russia, probably just to put this on Ukraine? Could Alexander Dugin have had any inkling at all that this was going to happen?
Well, I cannot say that these two personalities are very popular in Ukraine. So these people are not people who are discussed, within the population or on the news. Of course, experts know who is Mr. Dugin, as he is a very close ally, and he is the so-called brain of Mr. Putin in terms of his ideology. But I cannot say that, these are people who are really considered in Ukraine as, someone, as, huge targets. So basically, this accident will not really change much in terms of this war. Of course, it could be self-sabotage by Russian forces. It's of course difficult to judge because it's really very limited information from the side. Russian forces definitely accuse Ukraine. Ukrainian reaction was immediate. The advisor to the head of the president office announced that Ukraine has nothing to do with this. I cannot say that it was any other official reaction on that. So this event did not really made a huge news within the society here in Ukraine. But of course, everyone understands that this accident will not just, disappear. It's a very important accident to take a close look at. And of course, it's very important to follow how all this will end and what Russian investigation, if it happens, will conclude. For the moment, they announced that Ukrainian secret forces are involved, but again, Ukraine denies this. Of course, it is very, it's difficult. Again, I would just repeat myself, to judge because it happened very deep into the Russian territory next to Moscow. So I think that we should just wait probably for additional details on the accident.
Yeah, and I want to talk about, the fears over Zaporizhia, possible nuclear catastrophe. The Ukrainian president says, is he aware, who are listening to him across the world?
Well, I guess everyone is listening because, as we can see from the last weeks in meetings, President Zelensky with President Erdogan and Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Guterres, the main topic in both discussions and in their one discussion was actually the situation in the Zaporizhia power plant. US is very concerned, Europe is very concerned. And for Europe, of course, it's extremely, also dangerous situation because taking into consideration the size of this power plant is the biggest in Europe. If anything, if any catastrophe happened there, if any radiation is out, Europe would also be under threat. And in particularly NATO states. So if we talk about Poland and Baltic countries. So we heard last week that even within the NATO states, I think that it was British representative who started the conversation about actually the use of the fifth how you call it, the article in the NATO agreement, if something like this happens, because again, the threat is on Europe as well. So I guess that everyone is taking this very seriously, and at least we hear from the official announcement by Ukrainian president and government that all the discussions around the world with world leaders are pretty much concentrate on this situation as well.
Anna, thanks again for bringing us up to speed, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
And as we've already mentioned, concern is growing over security and safety in and around the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was in Kyiv last week, and he and the Turkish President Recep Erdogan and Ukraine's President all discussed the issue in a roundtable. Concern over safety of the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia grows, even as shelling remains unabated. On Saturday, Russia accused Ukrainian forces of another shelling on the nuclear power plant, while Ukraine said the Russian attack on the city of Voznesensk could have targeted South Ukraine nuclear power plant. Ukraine reportedly launched an artillery strike using Western long-range weapons at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant from across the Dnipro River on Saturday night. The shells exploded in front of an administrative building at the plant, causing no damage to key facilities of the plant. Work is underway to check if there are casualties. Zaporizhia has been controlled by Russian forces since early March, but the Ukrainian staff have continued to operate it. The shelling on the facility, of which both sides have exchanged accusations for weeks, has raised concerns of its security among the international community. The International Atomic Energy Agency said in a statement on Friday it is actively consulting with all parties concerned on sending a mission to the plant as soon as possible. Meanwhile, authorities in Ukraine's Nikopol have been preparing for emergency situations since the city lies across the Dnipro River from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, where intensified shelling has sparked concerns and fueled fears of a nuclear disaster. In Nikopol, cleanup crews have been working to sweep the streets and clear away debris left over from the shelling in recent weeks. Electricians were rewiring the neighborhood, and residents have been grappling with the situation of damaged homes. With daily shelling and growing alarm about what could happen at the facility, Nikopol officials are gearing up for the worst scenario. Emergency mobile radiation monitoring trucks have been deployed around the city to measure radiation levels if there's a suspected leak. In the event of a nuclear incident, contamination levels will depend on factors like the scope of the incident and wind direction. Concern over Zaporizhia also comes as the UN Secretary General and the Turkish President Recep Erdogan made a visit to the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, during the week. Turkey and Ukraine signed a deal last Thursday to reconstruct infrastructure damaged in Russia's attack. Mr. Guterres, who had arrived on Wednesday, met Presidents Volodymyr Zelensky and Recep Erdogan, with grain exports and concerns over Zaporizhia nuclear power plant leading the agenda.